ठीक है, so far we have discussed many themes, है ना. तो सबसे the main objective of these NCERT classes was to make you aware of the syllabus. And I think थोड़ा सा syllabus समझ में आ गया, है ना. And once we are aware of the syllabus, now we can think about कि हर टॉपिक को अच्छे से कैसे करना है. And will provide you PYQs. अभी तक तो नहीं मिला होगा ना वर्ल्ड वाला, तो आपको मंडे को प्रोवाइड कर देंगे PYQs, वो आप अपने साथ में रखिए, ठीक है सुपर्णा. So all the time what you need to do, you have to specifically keep referring the PYQs along with syllabus. All right, roughly we have just had an overview of the syllabus so far, all the important PYQs etc. along with the handouts. Okay, that will start from Monday. So let us see, the only part of the syllabus that is left is this one, imperialism and colonialism. This is an important theme, है ना. We are Indians, हमारे लिए तो सबसे ज़्यादा important है, because we were under this rule for how many years? Close to 200 years. Imperialism and colonialism. So let us try to understand the basic difference between these two terms. Okay, imperialism versus colonialism. Imperialism just means increasing the power and prestige of metropolis. Means suppose if Britain, they came to India, they increased the overall prestige as well as their power, it becomes imperialist. All right, so they are trying to increase sphere of influence. Means the area over which they can exert power. So they try to increase the sphere of influence. Now when we talk about specifically colonialism, colonialism में एक जो main connotation आता है, that means settling in a specific area. Like British, they came to India, all right, and they settled here, and then they started the chain of exploitation. Okay, so this is the basic difference. In more terms, imperialism becomes an ideology and colonialism becomes a practice. This is the basic difference between imperialism and colonialism, which we need to understand. Within colonialism, there will be n types of colonialism. Like some colonies can be settlers colony, like we have seen in America and Australia. है ना, दोनों में क्या था? People were not living. Eventually, prisoners, religious persecuted people, all of them, they were sent to either America or Australia. They become settlers colony. In India, it was the exploitative rule, where exploitation of our natural resources were done on a very large scale. Okay, so this is how we need to understand the difference between imperialism and colonialism. Eventually, this imperialism starts along with Renaissance. We had discussed in the first class what is the meaning of Renaissance. One of the outcome of Renaissance was the spirit of exploration. Okay, so Renaissance, it led to a spirit of exploration. As all of you know, Columbus, he went to United States of America, even though he was trying to find India. And our beloved Vasco da Gama, he came to Calicut, India. So this was the phase, the spirit of exploration. And these exploration, they were at times financed by the merchants and even monarchies. Like there was one very famous ruler from Portugal, his name was Henry. Okay, so he was known as the navigator that we discussed even in the modern India. All right, so these people, they were trying to finance people like Columbus and Vasco da Gama, and once they were able to find out the territories, then they used to go either for trade or for setting a colony. So this is how we can say Renaissance, which led to discovery of world. Also incentivized imperialism and colonialism. Okay, so this is how you need to understand the basic point. कहाँ से start होता है? Like the initial most famous colonial ruler, they were Spanish and Portugal. And Spanish, they were able to take care of whole of South America except Brazil, which was under the control of Portuguese. Okay. Similarly, if we see Indonesia, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, it came under the control of Portuguese, but then they were taken away from there by Dutch, and Dutch were able to control Indonesia. Okay. So similarly, you see India also. In India, this company started, first one was Portuguese, and after that we see the coming of Dutch, and then eventually coming of British, then Danish, and finally we have is French. Okay, so all these companies came in India in sequence. All right, so this is how we see the beginning of imperialism and colonialism. So the topic talks about this only. What is imperialism and colonialism? Then it talks about the topics. What topics within imperialism and colonialism? So first South and Southeast Asia, then they talk about Latin America and South Africa, then Australia, and finally imperialism and free trade, and how it led towards neo or new imperialism. What was that new imperialism all about? That we are going to discuss. Okay. So if we talk about South Asia, I think South Asia discuss करने की जरूरत ही नहीं है, ठीक है? South Asia means mostly India. ये तो पूरी modern history यही है, ठीक है? All of you know about this. Along with this, they were also able to get control over Myanmar or Burma. This was also attached to us, right? And it was separated by which act? Act of 1935. They also had control over Sri Lanka. All right. Nepal itself, it was having subsidiary relations with Britain. They signed treaty in the beginning of 19th century. Okay, so if we talk about South Asia, these countries were under their control. If we talk about overall Asia, there is one peculiar example of China. Okay, so China, if you'll see, China was divided into sphere of influences. Okay, so it's a classic case of imperialism. The sphere of influences were divided कि कहीं पे ब्रिटेन है, ठीक है, कहीं जापान है, कहीं फ्रांस है, कहीं जर्मनी आएगी बात पे, ठीक है. So it is known as Chinese melon, because चाइना का शेप वैसा है एक तो, ठीक है, एंड हेडिंग क्या देते हैं? द कटिंग ऑफ Chinese melon, where the China was cut into various sphere of influences. Okay, there was no specific colony in China. China को मोस्टली किस चीज के लिए यूज किया गया? फॉर ट्रेड पर्पस. All of you know about opium wars. Okay, so these opium wars etc. were fought for the sake of what? British used to export opium to China. Okay, and once a custom official ने उनको उठाया, ठीक है, and he destroyed the opium, and this led to opium wars and eventually even more subjugation of China. So China was divided into various sphere of influence. Similarly, the other territory that we have is Japan. So if we talk about around 1853, its door were opened by USA. Okay, USA were able to exert influence on Japan. This humiliation led to restoration of Meiji. Meiji is the dynasty which was restored in Japan by 1868. This we discussed even in the industrialization, है ना, वहाँ भी बात किया था. Matthew Perry, he was the commander who came from USA and he specifically opened the door of Japan to trade. All right. If we see other countries in Asia, one is Indo-China. And within Indo-China, we discuss the specific example of Vietnam. It is specifically also mentioned in our syllabus, right? So Vietnam, it was under the control of France. If you see, अगर आप Indo-China देखोगे, so westmost is Myanmar. Then we have 4 more countries. Thailand became a neutral country. ठीक है, जैसे अफ्रीका में we have one country which was never colonized, that was Liberia. ठीक है, Liberia was never colonized. It remained independent. It was Liberia and Ethiopia, but eventually Ethiopia was defeated by Italy and it was occupied. Similarly, in Southeast Asia, it was Thailand. ठीक है, तो Thailand it was a neutral area between, because Myanmar किसके अंडर है? British, and the rest of the Indo-China, ठीक है, लाओस हो गया, वियतनाम हो गया, ये सारा किसके अंडर आ गया? फ्रेंच के अंडर आ गया. So that's why it was a neutral territory. Similarly, if you see Afghanistan and Iran, ये भी क्या बन जाते थे? न्यूट्रल टेरिटरी बन जाते थे. ऑलराइट, द मेन रीजन वाज कि एक तरफ रशिया का डोमिनेंस है और एक तरफ किसका है? ब्रिटिश. ऑलराइट, सो इन एवरी वर्ल्ड में हर जगह देयर वाज सम न्यूट्रल टेरिटरी व्हिच वर केप्ट बाय दीस colonial powers. So here the most important part for us is Vietnam. Within Vietnam, things are going to change at the time of World War. As all of you know, in 1941, Japan is going to enter the World War. So Japan also came towards Vietnam and they defeated French. Okay, and they had one famous leader. His name was Ho Chi Minh. He was the leader. And नाम याद करना थोड़ा difficult रहता है, किसका क्या मीन है, but you have to remember it. So here is Ho Chi Minh. All right, and they created a party known as Viet Minh. This was the name of the political party. So this political party was boosted by the coming of Japan. But as we see, Japan was even more cruel imperialist power. That's why Japanese are hated throughout Southeast Asia. Okay, everybody thought Japan is going to come and he is going to liberate us from the colonial power. उनसे से भी ज़्यादा exploitation शुरू कर दिया after gaining power from these countries. Alright, so this started. Eventually, as all of us know, atomic bomb, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So at this point of time, France again got a chance to come back. So they knocked the door of Vietnam in 1946 कि भाई हम वापस आ गए. Knock knock, remember me? So France came back after getting defeated, है ना, कि हम तो victor powers हैं. But in 1946, Vietnam itself, their independence movement, it was very strong by then. And they started fighting with the France. So they did not like the rule of France. So from 1946, we are going to see a fight between France and Vietnam. Eventually, France was defeated. ठीक है, विलेज बावडाई वहां पर उनको डिफीट किया गया. In 1954, they signed Geneva Agreement. As usual, स्विट्जरलैंड हमेशा, ठीक है, Geneva Agreement. As per these agreement, वियतनाम की शेप है थोड़ी ऐसी सी है, ठीक है. So Vietnam was divided Alright, so Vietnam were divided. It became North Vietnam and South Vietnam. The North Vietnam, it came under the control of Communist Ho Chi Minh, and the South Vietnam, it came under the control of capitalist. Okay. This separation along the 17th parallel, this was to be a temporary measure. Okay, because it was specifically written that election will be held in within 1 to 2 years when the situation is going to be relatively easy. But by 1954, USA had realized that I failed in China. Korean War ended in 1953. So in Korea also, in North Korea, communist government came. Now USA was in no mood of getting more communist governments. So USA entered Vietnam and they were supporting the South Vietnam. We are going to support it, even though the dictator who was ruling over here, it was not in the interest of the people. Because of this, from 1954 all the way up to 1973, Vietnam is going to embroil itself in a war with the most famous power, that is USA. At one point of time, there are around 5 lakh soldiers. Use of chemical weapons by USA. Famous, all of you know, Agent Orange, Napalm jelly. These were the various kind of chemical weapons which were used by USA. With the period of time within USA, movement started because they were against use of chemical weapons. By that time, army अच्छा खासा destroy कर चुकी थी. The whole of Vietnam, it was reeling under the pain of these chemical weapons. By that time, USA eventually took the decision, just like it took the decision in Afghanistan, कि अपना हो गया, 20 साल पूरे हो गए, अब अपन चलते हैं, ठीक है. So this has been the policy of USA, कि 20 साल हो गए, अब चलते हैं, अपने से और नहीं होगा. So they retreated. After that, communists from North Vietnam, they captured power. The whole country was unified, elections were held, and finally it became unified. Okay, and their capital was kept at Hanoi. This is the question which UPSC asked this year, 20 marks. Okay, why Vietnam had to go through 30 years of war, one of the bloodiest war in the history of 20th century specifically, to get unified. ठीक है, तो ये थोड़ा सा ब्रीफ हिस्ट्री है और वियतनाम. व्हेन विल डिस्कस विद हैंड आउट थोड़ा सा और डिटेल में करेंगे, छोटे छोटे इवेंट्स बात करेंगे उनके बारे में, विच ऑल इंपॉर्टेंट यूएसए प्रेसिडेंट वर इन्वॉल्व, उन सब के बारे में बात करेंगे. ठीक है, किसका क्या पॉलिसी था, व्हाट वर द मेजर फैक्टर्स, हाउ अ स्मॉल कंट्री लाइक वियतनाम वाज एबल टू डिफीट यूएसए. दैट इज आल्सो अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन. एंड द बिगेस्ट रीजन वाज वियतनामीज, है ना, they were getting support from China as well as USSR. Second, if you see their geography, its geography is not that easy to handle. Majority of it has very dense forest. That's why they use the chemical weapons to clear it. Chemical weapon use करते हैं, सब बर्बाद कर देते हैं. So that terrain did not help USA. Third, people of Vietnam, they were committed. Okay, because of all these factors, USA had to eventually withdraw. So by 1973, Vietnam went away. All right. So if we see साउथ एंड साउथ ईस्ट एशिया, तो सबसे पहला इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक जो है इसी के साथ में मर्ज करके लिबरेशन में हमारा आता है वियतनाम का. तो एक बार कोलोनाइजेशन और इसी के साथ में वी हैव टू सी दी लिबरेशन. ऑलराइट, second important topic from here is about Indonesia. So Indonesia, first it came under the control of Portuguese, then they were defeated by Dutch or Holland until Second World War. हाँ 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 क्रोनोलॉजी है। सबसे पहले पोर्चुगीज ने वहां जाके उस पर कंट्रोल कर लिया था, ईस्ट इंडीज पे। ऑलराइट, व्हेन पोर्चुगीज वर डिफीटेड बाय डच एंड टिल सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर, टिल द इंडिपेंडेंस ऑफ इंडोनेशिया, it remained under the control of Dutch. Okay, and UPSC often asks questions. All right, they often ask questions. What was the difference in the imperialism of England, France versus Dutch? So ऐसे क्वेश्चन पूछे जाते हैं, तो you have to understand कि भाई क्या डिफरेंस था, किस तरीके का डिफरेंस था. We'll do all that, but Indonesia, it was first under the control of Portuguese, then it came under the control of Dutch. This is the basic beginning. Now, there was one system which was started by Dutch in Indonesia. It is known as culture system. Culture system बोलते हैं. Under this culture system, they were forced to grow few crops. Just like India, we had commercialization of agriculture. That was done because these crops, they were in great demand in Europe. That's why they established this culture system. Okay, within this there were elements of forced labor also. All right, so this was also there, and this system remained more or less till the beginning of 20th century, when some reforms were done by the Indonesians. Alright, there are large number of governor general, even though हमें उसको पढ़ने की जरूरत है नहीं, large number of governor are there. यहाँ पे ज़्यादातर जो क्वेश्चन आता है, it comes in comparison. But all of you know who is the main personality here? Dr. Sukarno. ठीक है? He became the main personality in Holland. Alright. Initially, there was a students' union. It was a students' union which was pushing for the identity of East Indies or Indonesia. Just like Vietnam, they also came under the control of Japan. They also came under the control of Japan during the World War II. Initially, Japanese, they were like liberators. Just like Vietnam, they were a liberator. But with the period of time, they also became very exploitative. And with their defeat, Indonesia declared themselves as independent. Just like France, we see the coming back of Indonesia. कैसे? Alright? So, we see the coming of Holland. And they again said it should be under our control. They tried to come back, again the fighting. Eventually, they signed the agreement, and by 1949, Indonesia became independent. But even then, their fight with some of the nearby island, it remained. East Timor वगैरह के ऊपर उनकी fight चलती रही, which was eventually taken to UN. UN ने फिर उसके ऊपर verdict दिया था in the favor of Indonesia. This is the brief story of how Holland was able to control Indonesia and how they eventually went down towards independence. ठीक है, यहाँ से क्वेश्चन जो आएगा, it is mostly going to come in comparison. What was the methods which were used by Holland or Dutch to control Indonesia? When we talk about Latin America, here our major focus is on powers like Venezuela, Bolivia, Colombia. These are the important powers. Okay. Brazil का इतना कुछ हम पढ़ते नहीं है. What was the system? Just know that they were under the control of Portuguese. Rest of the country, they were under the control of Spanish. Okay. And this Spanish rule was not that much exploitative because they freely mingled with the indigenous population. Like if you अगर वहाँ पे आज population देखो तो बहुत intermingled है, and majority of these countries they have the language as Spanish itself. All right, so these people intermingled, so the level of exploitation was less. Okay, but still nationalism started erupting in Latin America also with the successful of American War of Independence. Okay, after that there was revolution in France. This also increased the level of inflation at the time of coronation of Napoleon. Okay, at the time of coronation of Napoleon, one famous personality, his name was Simon Bolivar. He was in Europe and he came under the influence of ideas of French Revolution. After that, he came to Latin America. And then started a movement to liberate them. From 1818 till 33. Okay, this is the major phase within which maximum of these countries they were liberated. Okay, they were liberated. One major problem for Spain, why Spanish rule it became weak in Latin America, was it was put under the control of Joseph Bonaparte. He was the brother of Napoleon. Okay, also known as Spanish ulcer. During this time, Spain came under the control of France. Because of this, the rule of Spain, specifically in Latin America, it got loosened. And this opportunity eventually was taken away by Simon Bolivar. And he was able to help in the liberation of various Latin American countries. So this is how we read little bit, because जो colonialism वाला जो chapter है regarding these country, we do not have to do this in detail. बहुत ही basic surface knowledge से काम चल जाता है. What is important that UPSC asked this year, कि why even after becoming independent in the first half of 19th century, these countries are still underdeveloped? That is a very prominent question for us. Alright, so for that we need to understand there are certain factors which have led to underdevelopment in Latin America. And the most important is political instability. These people, since there was no tradition of democracy, okay, military governments have remained in place, and that's why time and again you're going to see coup. Second, lack of integration. Lack of integration of all the people. Like if you see case of India, we try to integrate Naxals, है ना, हम हर किसी को integrate करने की कोशिश करते हैं because we want to create an identity known as India, but this could not be done. That's why there are so many armed groups. सबने Netflix पे series तो देखी होंगी, ठीक है? All these series they are built on these people who could not stay specifically, all right? And because of this, FARC group पता होगा, it was in news, it was in Colombia. 50 years से fight चल रहा है, 50 years. All right, so lack of integration of people, political instability. Along with this, their economies, they are still dependent upon primary. So Venezuela को देखोगे, it is dependent upon oil, ठीक है? If you see Argentina, it is still dependent upon export of beef, etc., wheat. All right, so because of these, economies have not advanced. So lack of research and development, all the problems. Okay, because of this, they have not been able to remove poverty and they have remained underdeveloped. So these are the internal factors. Along with these internal factors, there are some external factors also. In that, these countries, they are now competing with developing countries like India and China. So this external competition is also affecting them. Okay. One more thing which have affected their fate is the role of USA. USA's companies, like what is the concept of neo-colonialism, we will understand, where private companies, they start controlling the resources. So many of the USA's country, they control large amount of resources in these country in various sectors. Okay, and this has also been responsible for the underdevelopment of Latin America. All right. So Latin America में यही दो main dimensions हैं. One, the role of Simon Bolivar. One question that has also come on Simon Bolivar. Simon Bolivar had a dream. He wanted to create a United States of Latin America. कि जैसे कि North America है, United States of America, he wanted to create it just for the Latin America. And he came up with a name, it is known as Gran Colombia. उन्होंने उसका नाम रखा Gran Colombia. But the biggest problem was, he said, I will be president. People said, ऐसे कैसे चलेगा? ठीक है, there was no tradition of democracy. People, they were still divided between. Some of them were loyalists towards Spanish, some of them they were loyalists for him. So they could not come to the final round कि भाई क्या exactly बनाना है. This Gran Colombia idea, it collapsed. तो इसके ऊपर भी यूपीएससी ने एक बार क्वेश्चन पूछा in 2017. So Asia and America. So these are the important things which we try to understand. Rest handout के साथ और डिटेल में करेंगे. Then we see Africa. Africa is a very peculiar example. ठीक है, so if you see Africa, so majority of these people, they remain limited to cost. Okay, so their rule remained limited to cost, and there were some factors for it. All right, this area of South Africa, within this, all of you know कि भाई important towns, आपको सबको पता ना, Cape Town, Durban, Pretoria, all these were important towns of South Africa. They came under the control of England. And why England? Why they were ruling in South Africa? Route यहाँ से route कहाँ के लिए आता था? India के लिए. That's why control over South Africa was very important. All right. So what do we need to understand? Nikhil, we have taken a lot of classes on historiography. Okay, so what you can do, you can go and check out the QIP sessions. Okay, 3-4 session है, playlist भी बना हुआ है, that you can see. Anyway, South Africa was one of the earliest to be colonized. Before England, again, this was under the control of Dutch. Okay, so the heritage of South Africa, आपने नाम देखा ना, A.B. de Villiers. So these people, they come from where? They are from lineage of Dutch. Okay, Dutch Afrikaners. इनका नाम क्या बना था? Okay, this became a name for the Dutch people. So initially they were in control, and finally the fight started by England. There were some initial settlers also. Okay, and all of you know कि गांधी जी के टाइम पे क्या हुआ था? Boer Wars. So all these things were the activities which were done by Britain, specifically in South Africa. But the rest of the Africa, nobody was having any potential to touch it. And the main reason was, first of all, there was no medicine for malaria at that point of time. And Africa used to be known as white man's burden, नहीं, graveyard. ठीक है, वो इंडिया के केस में. ठीक है. Those who went to Africa, they hardly ever came back. Okay, so this was one of the reasons. Second, very harsh climate. Okay, large number of tribes, and these tribes were very hostile. It was not like you can have foreign relation like with India, है ना. बाहर से आए मुगल एम्परर से मिले, उनको थोड़ी सी चाय वाय पिलाई और साथ में फिर हाँ चलो अब ट्रेड शुरू करते हैं. दैट वाज नॉट द काइंड ऑफ थिंग इन अफ्रीका. मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द इवन you can say tribal civilization बोल सकते हैं specifically, they were mostly in the tribal form and they were hostile to outsiders. Okay, because of these specific reasons could not colonize. Okay, but with the period of time things were developed, like malaria का medicine आ गया, new guns. Okay, डेवलपमेंट ऑफ स्टीमर्स, शिप्स वगैरह बनाई गई अच्छी अच्छी, एंड पीपल लाइक ट्रैवलर्स लाइक स्टैनली, है ना, दे वर गिवन बैकिंग बाय मोनार्की. वन कंट्री विच वॉज पर्टिकुलर वेरी हैप्पी फॉर क्रिएटिंग कॉलोनी इन अफ्रीका वॉज बेल्जियम. बेल्जियम वॉज अ वेरी स्मॉल कंट्री. अपने पास यूरोप में तो जगह है नहीं, ठीक है. So what they wanted some form of empire, and that empire they wanted to create in Africa. So they had King Leopold. Okay, so at his personal expenditure he sent large number of adventurers, and they were able to create a map for Africa. जो आपको मैप दिख रहा है, इसको बनाने में बहुत मेहनत लगाई इन लोगों ने. And it is on the basis of this map that they had a conference in 1884, 1885. Okay, this is known as Berlin Conference, and in this Africa was divided. ठीक है, so what they did कि अच्छा ये अफ्रीका है, let us divide it 1 2 3 4. इतनी स्ट्रेट लाइन कैसे बनाई आई अफ्रीका में? बिकॉज इट वॉज ए पेपर पार्टीशन एंड इट वॉज डन एट ए कॉन्फ्रेंस इन बर्लिन इन यूरोप. ठीक है, so in 1870 hardly 10% of Africa it was colonized. Okay, and by 1919, within 50 years the whole continent was colonized except Liberia. So that's why it is known as mad rush, okay, or scramble for Africa. करते हैं उस पर एक बार डिस्कस करते हैं. दिस इज नोन एज मैड रश और स्क्रैम्बल फॉर अफ्रीका. ठीक है, so within this there are certain features. There are certain features of this scramble for Africa which could not be seen in any part of the world. Okay, it could not be seen. So that we will discuss. But before that, this scramble of Africa, it happened because of unification of Germany and Italy. These were the two countries which got unified in Europe, but they were not having any territory. उनके पास कोई territory नहीं थी. So now what they wanted, like Kaiser William, he specifically said that I want a place in the sun. जितना sun के sun से दिखता है उतना मेरे को मांगता है. ठीक है, so I want a place in the sun, and for getting that place in the sun, what they wanted, they want British. Just like British, they wanted an empire, because British, they used to say that we have an empire over which the sun never sets, है ना. नॉर्थ और साउथ दोनों जगह हमारे पास है. ठीक है, जहाँ जाए वहीं पे हमें धूप मिल जाती है. So they said we also want a place in the sun. This became the objective of Germany and Italy. This was the main reason why we had the scramble for Africa. by 1871, as all of you know, France got defeated in the Battle of Sedan. Okay, and who became the main personality? It was Bismarck. And Bismarck was the person who was the chairman of the conference in 1884 and 85. So the concept of new imperialism or neo-imperialism, it means the stage of imperialism which starts from 1870-71, and it was with the unification of Germany and Italy. This is the phase, and in this phase colonies were acquired not for just for the sake of economy, they were acquired also for the sake of political motives और इंटरनेशनल प्राइड के लिए ज्यादा कर. अदरवाइज अफ्रीका में क्या था यार, इवेंचुअली लाइक दे वर एबल टू क्रिएट सम स्टेशंस इन अफ्रीका, है ना, बेस वगैरह बना दिए. दे वर लूजिंग मनी बाय सिटिंग देयर, बट दे स्टिल वांटेड प्लेस देयर बिकॉज इट वाज द, if you want to have pride in the international affairs, you should have territory. But that's why it is often said that the new imperialism, it was a nationalistic phenomena, not an economic phenomena. We'll discuss that also in the main classes कि इसका meaning eventually क्या है. It's a very difficult debate, उतना आसान नहीं है कि straight forward बोल दें हाँ ना. But what we are trying to discuss कि nationalism became very important. Like when we discuss the debate कि was India conquered in a planned manner or unplanned manner. So we say कि पहले unplanned था, किसी को पता ही नहीं था, those and that. At this point in time, everything was completely planned. Total backing of the monarchy state can be found in the new imperialism, and this is what is known as new imperialism. So we have to always try to understand that the stage of imperialism which starts from 1870-71 after unification of these, and it was guided by the forces of nationalism. And that's why one of the example of this new imperialism is the division of Africa. Okay, now let us understand the features of this mad rush. First of all, it was a paper partition. Never in the history of the world कोई पेपर पार्टीशन हुआ था कि पहले पेपर पार्टीशन किया कि भाई ठीक है, दिस इज माय एरिया, दिस इज माय एरिया, एंड देन दीज पीपल वेंट टू कॉन्कर देम. सो अफ्रीका वाज partitioned by sitting very nicely with wine in Europe, and then they went for conquering those areas. This area is under my control. After going that, where they start doing, they met the tribal people. ओके अब उनको लिखना पढ़ना तो आता नहीं है, ठीक है, अंगूठा लगवा लिया, ठीक है. सो दे टेल देम कि साइन कर दो एक बार. ऑलराइट, सो व्हाट दे स्टार्टेड डूइंग, दे स्टार्टेड आस्किंग हिम कि भाई ठीक है एक बार इधर आओगे, एक बार टच करना है. सो फ्रॉडुलेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स, fraudulent methods were used by these people to conquer territories. Tribes के साथ बैठ के अंगूठा लगवाना शुरू कर रहे हैं. This is what they were doing. Okay. At the time of conquering, as you can see in India, there were Carnatic wars, fight between France and Britain. There was no fight. This is the only area over which nobody was fighting. Okay, there were hardly, छोटा मोटा मोरक्कन क्राइसिस बाद में जाके होगा, but the complete phase जो starting वाला है, complete harmony between Europeans. This has hardly happened in the history of imperialism, where all the imperial power they sit together. हाँ ठीक है, ये तेरा, ये मेरा, ये हिस्सा. Like honest people, उन्होंने पूरा डिवाइड किया अफ्रीका को एक एक करके. हाँ ये तुम्हारा, ये मेरा. गांधी जी से इन्फ्लुएंस हो गए थे. Anyway, so this was again a very important feature of this mad rush. Then, as we have already discussed, within 50 years, the whole continent was captured. This has never happened. इंडिया को भी कॉन्कर करने में लंबा टाइम लगा, 150 साल तो लगे. 150 साल तो लगे कम से कम. But in the case of Africa, it was only 50 years, hardly 50 years. So because of these reasons, it is often said it was a mad rush. And one more feature which we have already discussed, it was because of the forces of nationalism. It was the stage of new imperialism, which led to the division or partition of Africa. Okay, so this is how Africa came under the control of Europeans. ऐसा कोई रोल नहीं था, उनके नेटिव ट्राइब्स थे. दिस वाज आल्सो a question asked by UPSC that if we read the European historiography, okay, there is no African history. Means they do not say India में हम recognize Mughals etc. this and that, but if you see from European history, there is no African history before the coming of European. This was asked in 2015. So इसमें थोड़ा सा पढ़ना पड़ेगा कौन कौन से ट्राइब कौन कौन सी कंट्रीज में स्पेसिफिकली थे and how they were brought under control by these various countries. Okay, but as such कोई significant नहीं है. हाँ, ठीक है. Now just like Latin America, reasons for underdevelopment. Now here the biggest problem for underdevelopment, it starts with, first of all, large number of tribes. Okay, and the manner in which countries were created. UPSC asked a question last year, do you think that the tribes of this Africa, they were not ready for independence, right? So within one country you have seen large number of civil wars, है ना? इतने सारे civil war क्यों हो रहे हैं? Because these tribes are completely against one another and they have to live within one country. That's why, because of this military dictatorship, you can take the example of Sudan, South Sudan, okay, Rwanda, you can see. So tribal wars, this is the biggest problem. Second, the manner in which these countries have been created by Europeans, they are not acceptable. Third, no system of governance, because if you see India's constitutional history, more than 150 years, okay, Africa 50-60 साल मुश्किल से. Alright, and within this they could not and they did not brought in stable government. Okay, why? They did not brought in the system of governance itself, because they thought freedom struggles are going to start like the other countries, so we are not going to start any form of government. This also affected the development of Africa. Okay, then you can see आज की जितने भी problems हैं सारी आप बता सकते हो. Climate, if you see it, it is relatively very harsh. Terrorist movements, ठीक है, बहुत सारी जगह. All of you know कि political instabilities, Arab Spring, large number of factors are responsible for the underdevelopment of Africa. Okay, when a 20 marker question comes, you can write as much as you want. You can Neo-Colonialism, you can also write. Like majority of these countries, they are still under the control of their European masters. Like if you see Belgium के पास कहाँ से चॉकलेट आएगी? But सबसे famous क्या है? Belgian chocolate, right? And it comes from Congo. It comes from Congo. This is the area which is still under the control of Belgium, not directly but indirectly. This is the concept of Neo-Colonialism, where you do not have direct political authority, but you use other various powers to control the overall society. Okay, so the concept of Neo-Colonialism, and in most cases they use the financial powers. These financial powers can be used either through a company or through international organization, like we have seen in case of many countries. IMF, they give loan and then they come up with some tied conditions. Okay, since these are poor companies, they are poor countries, it is very easy. Okay, it is very easy to bargain. Yesterday आपने देखा Uganda has said war on Russia is a war on Africa. अब Uganda पता नहीं क्या gift दिया अलग से. Okay, so it's very easy to get control over them because these are poor countries. और युगांडा किससे लड़ेगा? Right. So this is what is neo-colonialism. And this concept of neo-colonialism was given by Kwame Nkrumah. He has written a book, Neo-Colonialism. Okay, the last phase of capitalism, the last phase of imperialism. Neo-Colonialism, the last phase of imperialism. This is the book which is written by Kwame Nkrumah, and he was the leader of Ghana. He became the Prime Minister of Ghana. Only in very few countries governance was brought in by European powers, and one of them was Ghana. And he himself was then toppled in civil war. है ना? नाम से जाने का एक रीजन ये भी, इनको भी हटा दे, हटो यहाँ से बहुत बनाते हुए घूम रहे हो नाम. Anyway, so this is the concept of neo-colonialism, and in this majority of the country, this is the reason why foreign capital was hated in India also. We were against foreign investment, because through foreign investment the forces of neo-colonialism, they used to come and dominate the society. आज तो हम बड़ी जल्दी से करते हैं closed economy, this and that, but अगर शायद उस टाइम close नहीं करते तो हम भी ऐसे कुछ बने हुए बैठे होते हैं युगांडा की तरह. ठीक है? Because at that time what was more important, we should have at least a separation from these power. We should think about our own interest, even though the growth can be slow. But if you're under the influence of some other countries, eventually in the long run you're going to lose. Okay, so that's why in India foreign investment was not seeken in the beginning. Alright, because it was one of the reason of neo-colonialism. So we have been able to understand 3-4 concept. एक हमें colonialism समझ में आ गया, imperialism, what was the new stage of imperialism, and finally what was neo-colonialism. This neo-colonialism comes after the concept which is known as decolonization. Decolonization is nothing but, it means the freedom struggles, or how with the period of time we saw the emergence of free nations. Okay, it starts with American War of Independence. It was the first colony, okay, which became independent, and with the period of time, लास्ट कहाँ पे आती हैं? अफ्रीका, countries like Eritrea. So the decolonization movement, it starts from here and goes all the way up to Africa. So one topic which is in our optional is how decolonization led to breakup of empires. So all of you know कि empires किसके कौन-कौन से थे? There were 5-6 important powers. ठीक है? British, आधा वर्ल्ड तो उसी के पास था. So you can write down about India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, okay? Then you can even write about Egypt, South Africa. All of this was under the control of British, and how in a phased manner all of them became independent. So ये बहुत ही आसान सा question है, how it led to breakup of empire. So we identify the colonial power, and then we just write the years. तो बड़ा बचे Spain, Portugal, little bit of territory was also under the control of USA. So we just write down the territories which were under their control, and then we write down the years in which they got disintegrated. So how colonization was the phase when they were able to create an empire. Initial empires they were created by Spain and Portugal, and then it was the phase of British, how they were able to conquer. Okay, from 1607 they went to stay in USA. It became a colony like India. All of you know they came in around 1600, है ना? 1600 में charter मिला, 1608 से वो इंडिया में लैंड करके, and from there they created similarly Myanmar, Egypt, all these areas. फ्रांच में आप इंडो चाइना लिख दो. एंड देन अदर टेरिटरीज ऑफ अफ्रीका, ठीक है, अल्जीरिया वगैरह ये सारी कंट्रीज इनके अंदर लिख सकते हैं। हॉलैंड में हमारा स्पेसिफिकली इंडोनेशिया, जर्मनी एंड इटली दे वर द लास्ट टू कम, ठीक है, जर्मनी हमारा तंजानिया वगैरह ये सब आ जाएंगे, बट इवेंचुअली दे वर आल्सो ओवरटेकन बाय ब्रिटिश। आफ्टर फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर द टेरिटरीज ऑफ जर्मनी दे वर डिवाइडेड अमंग दी colonial powers, the victor powers, so that's why जितना भी इसका ये था, स्पेन में you can talk about Latin America, यहाँ पे specifically you can write about Brazil, even some territory in India remain under their control, दमन दीव, गोवा वगैरह, ठीक है, इनिश, ठीक है, USA it was able to control over Philippines, then you have to just in the second part connect कि how over the period of time, ठीक है। तो देयर वाज वन फेमस पर्सनालिटी फ्रॉम फ्रांस, ही सेड colonies are like fruit, okay, colonies are like fruit, and they stay with you until till they are ripen, है ना, once they are ripen fruit क्या करता है, ट्री से नीचे गिर जाता है, so he said colonies are like fruit, and they stay with the tree till they are ripen. So do you have to say कि भाई हाँ ठीक है, इंडिया का एग्जांपल लो, so it was a fruit for British, drain of wealth, once we were able to get the system of governance, जाना ही था हमें तो, ठीक है। So this is, they are very good statements which you can remember for your introductions and conclusion, right? This is again one topic जो कि यहाँ पे था, disintegration of empire in the face of emergence of nationalities across the world, okay. So रफली अपना सिलेबस इतना ही है। थोड़ा सा ऑस्ट्रेलिया का, ऑस्ट्रेलिया का लाइक यू कैन रिमेंबर कि ऑस्ट्रेलिया में इनिशियली देयर वाज नो सेटलमेंट्स, ओनली एबोरिजिन्स दे यूज्ड टू लिव देयर, है ना, एबोरिजिन्स दे वर द ओरिजिनल पीपल ऑफ ऑस्ट्रेलिया। आफ्टर लूजिंग कॉलोनी लाइक यूएसए, ब्रिटिश दे वेंट इन सर्च ऑफ वेरियस इंपॉर्टेंट एरियाज, देयर वाज वन फेमस पर्सन नोन एज, कौन गया था वहाँ एक्सपेडिशन के लिए, जेम्स कुक, ठीक है। सो ही वेंट देयर, ही सॉ कि हाँ कहाँ ऑस्ट्रेलिया, कहाँ न्यूजीलैंड है, ऑल दैट वाज सीन, एंड देन अ शिप इट वेंट इवेंचुअली, एंड द फर्स्ट सेटलमेंट स्टार्ट्स फ्रॉम 1788, वहाँ पे सेटलमेंट स्टार्ट करते हैं, सिडनी से स्टार्ट करते हैं धीरे धीरे करके। ऑल ऑफ यू नो देयर हाउ मेनी स्टेट्स इन ऑस्ट्रेलिया, 5-6 स्टेट्स हैं, विक्टोरिया, क्वींसलैंड, टस्मानिया, ऑल दिस। अगर आप उसका वो देखोगे यूनियन टेरिटरी, तो 2 यूनियन टेरिटरी, एक नॉर्दर्न टेरिटरी, एक कैनबरा है, ठीक है, याद करना पड़ेगा, वेस्टर्न ऑस्ट्रेलिया और दिस एंड दैट, है ना, कम से कम जीएस से इतना तो याद कर लो। सो देयर वर 6 ऑल दी, सो मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द सेटलमेंट्स इन ऑस्ट्रेलिया दे वर इन दी कोस्टल एरिया, जस्ट लाइक अफ्रीका, बीच में वहां भी इतना घना जंगल है, ठीक है, वहां भी सेटलमेंट्स दिट आर वेरी डिफिकल्ट। सो मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द इवन पॉपुलेशन ऑफ ऑस्ट्रेलिया इट्स इन द कोस्टल सिटीज, है ना, जैसे कि पर्थ हो गया आपका वेस्ट में, ईस्ट में जाते हो तो हमारा आ जाता है सिडनी वगैरह आता है। दिस इज हाउ दे आर डूइंग। सो विद द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम जितना भी इनका ऑस्ट्रेलिया का जो था, ऑस्ट्रेलिया में जो सेटलमेंट था इनिशियली इट वाज वेरी लिमिटेड, सो पीपल फ्रॉम इंग्लैंड, दोज हु वर कन्विक्ट्स, दे वर सेंट, रिलीजियस परसिक्यूशन, whoever went there उनका सेंटेंस कम कर देते थे, एंड दे वर गिवन लैंड, जाओ जितना जो करना है करो, alright. So it was very difficult to settle in Australia, but the things started changing when we found gold, and once this gold, वहां से हुआ rush, and वहां से settlements increased with the period of time। जो भी आपका ऑस्ट्रेलिया वाला, अच्छे से ये वाला जो एरिया है, दिस इज सिडनी, ठीक है, यहाँ पे कहीं आपका पर्थ है, यहाँ पे नीचे की तरफ मेलबर्न है। देखो ये कर लो, ये क्वेश्चन 20 मार्कर में आएगा, ठीक है, और आएगा तो उस दिन बहुत खुश होगे, बिकॉज मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द स्टूडेंट्स उनको हवा भी नहीं लगने वाली ऑस्ट्रेलिया में क्या है। हाँ, डायग्राम बनाना भाई अच्छे से, इससे अच्छा बनाना है। ओके, एनीवे, सो आफ्टर दिस गोल्ड रश देयर वर सेटलमेंट्स, ठीक है, इनके सबके नाम याद आपको रखने पड़ेंगे, विच आर द स्टेट, क्वींसलैंड है, देन यहाँ पे एक और विच थिंग बिकेम फेमस वाज द शिप रियरिंग, है ना, मरीनो शिप इज वाज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड, देन दे आल्सो इंट्रोड्यूस अल्फा अल्फा ग्रास, शीप है तो कुछ तो खाएगी, तो दे आल्सो इंट्रोड्यूस अल्फा अल्फा। वहां से हमारी कौन सी इंडस्ट्री स्टार्ट हो गई, wool industry. So they became the pioneer of wool industry. Along with the resources, wool industry, etc., they were able to create important settlements. और इन्हीं settlements को धीरे धीरे करके इन्होंने एक एक्ट बना दिया था, okay? And they were eventually given independence by 1910. ठीक है, न्यूजीलैंड जो थी that was also under the control of England. न्यूजीलैंड did not join this federation. उन्होंने मना कर दिया, we are not going to join the federation of Australia. तो वहाँ की भी स्टोरी लगभग सेम ही है, ठीक है, बोथ वर स्पेसिफिकली फाउंड आउट एट द सेम टाइम। तो ऑस्ट्रेलिया का भी एक ही टॉपिक इजी सा है, क्वेश्चन बहुत आसान सा आएगा, ऐसा कुछ नहीं, कॉमनवेल्थ के अंदर तो है ही। वो सब देखो टाइम पास चीजें चलती रहती हैं, बट द ओनली थिंग इज बाय 1910 दे वर गिवन इंडिपेंडेंस, ठीक है, इनको इंडिपेंडेंस मिल गया था। तो ऑस्ट्रेलिया इज वन टॉपिक, आज तक कभी क्वेश्चन नहीं आया है, तो दिस इज वन एरिया वेयर यू कैन एक्सपेक्ट क्वेश्चन इन द कमिंग ईयर्स। 23-24 वाला जो इंटरवल है, इस टॉपिक को तैयार करके बैठ जाओ, ठीक है, क्योंकि अभी देखो इस साल जब रोरिंग 20s आ सकता है, ठीक है, तो वी कैन एक्सपेक्ट वन क्वेश्चन ऑन ऑस्ट्रेलिया ऑल्सो। ऑस्ट्रेलिया इज वन टॉपिक, करेंगे इसको अच्छे से कवर करेंगे, ठीक है, दैट इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी अ प्रॉब्लम। हियर ऑल्सो यस, वन टॉपिक विच इज इंपॉर्टेंट फ्रॉम हियर इज within Africa it was apartheid. Apartheid, it starts in South Africa, as we have already discussed, because of the coming of Dutch settlers, then English versus the black population. 2/3 of the population belonged to black, 1/3 were these white. This policy was started by D.F. Malan in 1848. The reasons were, after Second World War, blacks demanded racial equality. Bhai, we should be on the same front. Right now is the time of equality, but that was one because of the demand for racial equality by blacks. So this affected the interest of these people. Dutch church जो है, they said they also gave 100% contribution to apartheid. Yes, there is a difference between blacks and whites, so they should be separated. Third, to dominate the resources of the country. Because of these reasons, this policy was brought in. Literally, it means racial segregation on the basis of law. कि लॉ बना के दोनों को अलग अलग कर दिया। There were different kinds of disabilities which were imposed on the black population. The most important means different residential area. Okay, these residential areas were known as Bantustan. All right. Then they were given permits. They could not leave their areas. Okay, they required permits. Third, they had separate buses, separate government offices, सब कुछ पब्लिक प्लेसेस, सब कुछ इनका अलग अलग था। They were not allowed to marry the whites, है ना, to ensure that there should be racial purity. Okay, so there was complete separateness between whites and blacks. Right. So all these were the factors of apartheid. They were not having any kind of fundamental right, economic right. All of that was regulated by the government of D.F. Malan. Okay, so one personality which is going to become very famous, that was Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela initially he created a group known as MK, or Spear of the Nation. So it was an extremist group. So initially he was an extremist. Gandhian तो बाद में बने. Initially he was an extremist. Okay. Then around 1955 they started bus boycott. Eventually he was jailed, and he was jailed at which island? Robben Island. He was jailed from around 1963, remained there till 1991. For 27 years he remained in jail, but he became the symbol against the apartheid. Okay, so in the phases manner, different prime minister or presidents, they came in Africa, and slowly some of the elements of these apartheid were rolled back. Like पहले उनको फिर allow कर दिया भाई ठीक है, you can have your own legislature. Okay, system of passes was reduced, but the eventual abolition, it's going to come in only in 1991 when the whole system of apartheid was dismantled. Okay, so this we are going to discuss about it. UPSC ने 2 बार 10 मार्कर, यहाँ से mostly 10 मार्कर आता है. In 2013 they asked 125 मार्कर, तब 25 नंबर के क्वेश्चन आ रहे थे, बट यहाँ से क्वेश्चन आने के चांसेस रहते हैं, तो इसलिए हमें इसको करना चाहिए. One more topic which is important is Egypt. Egypt is famous for Arab Brotherhood, भाईचारा. ठीक है, ऑलराइट. और fatherhood. Here the main person who became the symbol was Nasser. The whole issue starts over Suez Canal. All of you know that the Suez Canal was built with the efforts of British as well as French. Okay, it was open to navigation by 1869, the year in which Gandhiji were born. All right. After that, it was under the control of Britain and France. So this remained like this. By 1936, they signed a treaty कि भाई ठीक है, we are going to make Egypt independent, but this was not done. Okay, they were reminded many times. So eventually, Nasser, he took a decision and he nationalized Suez Canal. This was nationalized. This was seen as a symbol of war by Britain and France. So Britain and France, they thought about invading Egypt. In this, they were helped by their number one friend, Israel. मौका ढूंढता रहता है बस किस क्या करना है, क्या करना है. ठीक है. So Israel also came in because, as you all of you know, that the creation of Israel in itself is very controversial, and all the Arab countries, they have only one aim. We want to finish Israel from the Arab world, from the Arab map. कि अरब के मैप पे इजराइल होना नहीं चाहिए. This is what their aim is. Because of this, they have already had many wars. है ना, 3 अरब वॉर हो चुके हैं full fledged. So at this point of time, like this was the time of Cold War. Since it was the time of Cold War, both USA as well as USSR, they were against the invasion of Egypt. Okay, but both of them, they have permanent seats. तो उन्होंने क्या कर दिया? Veto. So your resolution was passed by UN General Assembly, and 64-5, everybody said that they should come back, and this led to the downfall of the prestige of Britain. UPSC asked this question in 2014, general studies as well as optional, कि how it led to the decline of the prestige of Britain. इसके बाद तो इज्जत चली गई ना, है ना, because they went like they'll finish off Egypt. किसने रोक लिया? USA and USSR. Now they were other superpowers, so भूल चुके थे. They did not realize that 2 superpowers have already come into the picture. When these superpowers did not back them, they have to come out. And seeing the UN General Assembly, eventually they have to roll back, and this increased the popularity of Nasser. Okay, so all the objectives of the Britain and France, they got failed, and that's why it is often said this specifically showed Britain that the good old days are over. Okay, yeah? And finally the sun has set. So this is what the Britain realized in a very hard manner. कि एक जगह इन्वेड करने के बाद समझ में आया कि भाई नहीं अब खत्म हो चुका है सब, पैकअप. Yeah, this was the time when they realized that probably the sun will never rise again. This was the time period. ठीक है, so there are various topics in world history, कुछ unconnected भी हैं, ठीक है. But what you should do as a student of world history, सारे topics को एक दूसरे से connect करना सीखो कि किस तरीके से कौन सा एक दूसरे से. Once the topic starts with Renaissance से start होता है, but आपके पास Renaissance में क्वेश्चन आएगा नहीं. वहां से बस आप समझ लीजिए किसी क्वेश्चन में रेफरेंस जब देना होता है, सपोज कोई क्वेश्चन आ जाए डायरेक्टली ऑन इंपीरियलिज्म एंड कोलोनियलिज्म, तो 1 पॉइंट वी कैन राइट अबाउट रेनेसां. ऑलराइट सर, तो उसी तरीके से क्वेश्चन जैसे यूपीएससी ने क्वेश्चन पूछा था कि हाउ द साइंटिफिक रेवोल्यूशन लेड टू द राइज ऑफ एनलाइटनमेंट. ऑलराइट, so you should know about scientific revolution, then beginning of enlightenment. What were those major ideas? What were the ideas of Kant and Rousseau? What was their contribution? Then how this enlightenment spread in the colonies. So this enlightenment spread in the colonies along with the colonial masters. So if we see Latin America, it was the 18th and 19th century. ठीक है, उसके साथ में वहाँ पे जाता है. Similarly, if we see India, तो 19th century ज़्यादा prominent है. Alright, Africa 20th century. So you have to remember कि how the enlightenment spread to the various colonies. Then the ideas of socialism से पहले we should read industrialization. When we understand industrialization, how the industrialization is different in different countries, then we come कि it led to the rise of socialism, and then what changes were made by Karl Marx. अब इसी एक टॉपिक से 2 क्वेश्चन है इस बार 10 मार्कर में, है ना, 5A एंड 5C 2 क्वेश्चन. तो अब आपको हर टॉपिक को ढंग से लेके चलना पड़ेगा. देन वी कम अ लिटिल बिट डाउन, यहाँ आते फिर यहाँ से टॉपिक आ गया अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन कि हाउ द मिसमैनेजमेंट वाज डन बाय द ब्रिटेन. So we try to understand कि भाई, and then some historiography based question can also come कि was it really a revolution or evolution. So वो हम क्लास में करेंगे सारी historiography इनकी. Similarly, American Civil War, this topic was left, American Civil War. So what was the reason for American Civil War? The biggest question was that of slavery. So this was fought from 1861 to 65. Alright, so if you see America, चपटा सा मैप है इसका, ठीक है, नॉर्थ एंड साउथ. So here majority of the states at this point of time, they were having 34 states in 1861. 11 states they created a confederacy of southern state, and there were 23 states in north. They are against slavery, and the biggest problem was south states, they are known for cotton plantation agriculture, and that's why slavery was an important part of their society as well as economy, while on the other side the north side thought these people are backward, when will they become enlightened. All those problems were staying in the north. So because of this, American Civil War starts because there was an unclear question on or unclear answer with respect to slavery. Like if we see all the way from 1783 till 1865, all of you know कि पहले जो अमेरिका था, it was only this part. These were the 13 colonies. So whenever they were trying to purchase more and more area, there was always a competition in USA. कि will there be slavery or not? Okay, so this led to a kind of competition within America, and by 1861, when they were having 34 states, even though majority of them they were not having slavery remained a very big question. The change comes because of the election of Abraham Lincoln. All of you know the views of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln said if slavery is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. Okay, so this was the opinion of Abraham Lincoln. Because of this, the southern state they were terrorized, and all of you know कि इनके यहाँ जो election होता है वो अक्टूबर नवंबर में होता है, ठीक है, and then they join office in somewhere around Feb. फिक्स है ना, मतलब अपने तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में द डेट ऑफ इलेक्शन फिक्स नहीं है, उनका सब फिक्स है, ठीक है. So even before he came to the office, 7 state seceded. Okay, उन्होंने छोड़ दिया यूनियन. There was no provision in the Constitution of America कि secession कर सकते हैं या फिर नहीं कर सकते. You can leave the union or not. So they said we can leave it. All right. At this point of time, Abraham Lincoln, he changed his stance. He said, if there is no slavery and preservation of union, I will accept it. If there is some slavery and some not slavery, even then I will accept it, because as a president, his main duty was to preserve the union. Okay, so he was trying to allay these southern states, I am not going to abolish slavery. You just come back to the union, because that is what I have been elected for. अब तुम यूनियन लेके चले गए, प्रेसिडेंट किसका बनूंगा? ठीक है. So there was a very important question from Abraham Lincoln. But when things could not work in 1861, in South Carolina, Fort Sumter, this was the place where the army of the southern state, they started fighting with the Union, and this led to beginning of this Civil War. This Civil War is going to end only in 1865, and briefly after that, Abraham Lincoln, he was assassinated. Okay, but large number of changes came in America after this Civil War. After this Civil War, as you see, it was made, an amendment was made that nobody can leave the Union. Slavery was abolished. They were given rights. Okay, because of the fight from 1861 to 65, large amount of military infrastructure, telecommunication, all these important developments came in America. That's why it is often said that this American Civil War, it was like a second revolution in the history of America. And UPSC asked a question, I think last year they asked, कि it is important for its direct as well as indirect effects. Okay, तो वहाँ पे आपको यही सारी चीजें लिखने की. What was the direct, तो आपको पता लगे बहुत सारी constitutional amendments were done, है ना. So far we have only have 27 amendment in the Constitution of USA. 10 तो स्टार्टिंग में होगी थी बिल ऑफ राइट्स. सोचो कब से, और अपने वाले हैं हर साल. अरे इस साल नहीं हुआ क्या? एक तो कर ही देते हैं. 75 साल में और ज्यादा. कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का तो और भी कम हुआ है. 72 ईयर्स में 100 से ऊपर तो जा चुके हैं, मतलब एवरेज पर ईयर मोर देन 1. ठीक है. And these people have had more than 220, 230 years, and they only have 27. So that's why इनका जो constitution, it is very rigid. Alright. So that उस पे तो क्वेश्चन भी आता है GS2 में कंपैरिजन करने के लिए, जुडिशरी वगैरह को कंपेयर करने के लिए. Anyway, so American Civil War, regarding this, American Civil War is also connected to India's modern history because of the Deccan Riots. कि हाँ उस टाइम पे कॉटन का प्राइस इंक्रीज होता है, and eventually there is slack in the prices which leads to the Deccan Riots in 1875. Anyway, so we have discussed the whole syllabus. ठीक है, थोड़ा थोड़ा हर चीज का इंट्रोडक्शन कर दिया है. What you can try after this कि एक बार आप वो NCERT पढ़ लो. ठीक है. We'll meet on Monday. From Monday we'll start with our first topic of enlightenment. Enlightenment से start करेंगे. You will be having handouts. We'll be discussing the previous year questions etc. along with the topics. It will be relatively very easy. अगर एक बार आप समझ लेते पूरी स्टोरी तो फिर क्लास में बैठना बड़ा आसान होता है. So that we can think about higher order problems. नहीं तो फिर क्या होता है ना, फिर क्लास में भी think about कि enlightenment क्या था, ये क्या था, वो क्या था. ठीक है. Now we at least we can think of कि हाँ चलो ठीक है enlightenment मुझे पता है. What kind of ideas. So I do not have to repeat all those same things कि हाँ ठीक है preamble के में क्या क्या values हैं. ठीक है. So this was the idea of these NCERT classes. So all of you. Time आप लोगों को पता ही है सबको. ठीक है. Our time will shift to 2:30 to 5:50. The same अपना जो बैच है वही चलता रहेगा. So from there we'll start from Monday. अभी हमने पूरा एक ओवरव्यू तो ले लिया है, तो आप लोगों को तो वैसे दिक्कत आएगी नहीं. Those of you will be watching later on specifically, तो भाई इसको एक बार रिवाइज कर लेना. ठीक है. So that we can have class from Monday onwards, and those classes will be specifically focusing on the areas from where UPSC asks question. Okay, story हमने पूरी सुन ली है, सारे टॉपिक्स का इंट्रोडक्शन आपको मिल चुका है आई थिंक. ओके. सिलेबस विद द राइज ऑफ यूएसए एज अ लोन पावर, तो मतलब लगभग आपके करंट अफेयर से मैच होता है. ठीक है. यूरोपियन यूनियन का जो था उसका एक्सपेंशन प्लस साथ में राइज ऑफ यूएसए. जैसे we see dissolution of USSR in 1991, same year we see the creation of European Union. ठीक है, उसके बाद में यूरोपियन यूनियन का एक्सपेंशन आपको याद रखना है. एंड आफ्टर दैट व्हाट हैज बीन द इम्पैक्ट ऑफ द राइज ऑफ यूएसए ऑन वर्ल्ड पॉलिटिक्स, बोथ पॉजिटिव एज वेल एज नेगेटिव. सो दिस इज द एंड ऑफ वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री. तो वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री में रिलेटिवली प्रॉब्लम देख सकते, देखो प्रॉब्लम तभी आता है व्हेन यू आर नॉट एबल टू रिलेट. इंटरलिंकेजेस सबसे ज़्यादा डिफिकल्ट वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री में है, बाकी सब में आसान है. यहाँ सबसे ज़्यादा डिफिकल्ट इंटरलिंकेजेस है. एकदम से स्टेटमेंट आएगी, समझ हवा भी नहीं लगेगी क्या बोल रहे हैं, है ना. व्हेन फ्रांस sneezes everybody catches cold and you are like कि कौन सा कोल्ड है ये कोरोना तो नहीं है. ठीक है. So here you have to understand the statement. That is the, I would say, most difficult thing. All right. Like this year they have asked few questions like that, है ना. थोड़ा सा आगे पीछे से पूछा और फिर उसमें परेशान कर दिया मैक्सिमम लोगों को. बट लुक, वी कैन ऑलवेज थिंक अबाउट कि भाई कौन सा टॉपिक ईजी है. मैंने आपको बताया भी था, मैं आपको बता दूंगा कौन से इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स है जहाँ से क्वेश्चन आने के चांसेस है. लिस्ट वगैरह भी दे देंगे. ओनली थिंग इज यू हैव टू प्रिपेयर दोज टॉपिक्स होलिस्टिकली. ठीक है, होलिस्टिकली नहीं करेंगे तो कहीं ना कहीं दिक्कत आएगी. ठीक है, बट ठीक है, इस अप्रोच के साथ हम अच्छा खासा कवर कर लेंगे. एक और चीज़ है, अक्टूबर में अपनी क्लास सैटरडे को भी होगी, बिकॉज बीच में बहुत छुट्टियाँ हैं. ठीक है, वी विल नॉट बी एबल टू फिनिश सिलेबस ऑन टाइम. तो हमें सिलेबस पे कंप्लीट करना है. तो जो पहला सैटरडे छोड़ के इस वीक में 3 क्लासेस रहेंगी. नेक्स्ट वीक वी हैव क्लास ऑन 3rd, 4th, 5th को फिर दशहरा है. अब दशहरा को तो छुट्टी करनी पड़ेगी, व्हाट कैन आई डू, मतलब स्टाफ के लिए भी है. ठीक है. एंड देन वी हैव क्लास ऑन 6th, 7, 8, 9 को आपका टेस्ट है सबका, है ना. नेक्स्ट संडे समझ में आ रहा है ना. हाँ, अभी थोड़ी देर पहले पूछा था. आप मत घबराइए, आप नए बैच में आए हो. दोज वर इन मॉडर्न. ठीक है, तो आते ही टेस्ट. एनीवे, सो टेस्ट आप उस दिन कर लेना 9th को. 10th से फिर जो क्लास स्टार्ट होगा, दिवाली के टाइम 2-3 दिन की छुट्टी है, वो एक साथ आप में से किसी को घर जाना हो, संडे, मंडे, ट्यूसडे, वेडनेसडे 3-4 दिन का ब्लॉक बन रहा है, बिकॉज वो दिवाली, भाई दूज सब एक साथ आ रहा है 3-4 दिन का. एंड देन तो आप ले लगा लिया कि तीनों सैटरडे आपका क्लास होगा, बारिंग दी 8th को क्लास नहीं है. हाँ, 3 सैटरडे, सिर्फ 3 सैटरडे मैनेज कर लेना इतना सा, बिकॉज फिर हम वो क्लास कंप्लीट कर पाएंगे टाइम पे. कौन सा? कोई नहीं, लाइव देख लेना. क्लास ऑनलाइन इसलिए सबको दिया जाता है एक्सेस. दैट यू शुड वॉच, यहाँ हो, घर हो, बहाना ना मिले. ठीक है, अक्टूबर एंड तक खत्म हो जाएगा, मोस्ट प्रोबेबली 29th. ठीक है, मैंने जो मतलब हिसाब लगाया उसके हिसाब से विल बी रिक्वायरिंग अराउंड 18 to 19 क्लासेस. तो वो कंप्लीट हो जाएंगे. अगर 3, वो छुट्टियां बहुत आ गई ना बीच में, नहीं तो और पहले भी हो सकता था. दशहरा भी आ रहा है, ये भी आ रहा है. ठीक है. एनसीईआरटी दैट आई एम सेइंग स्टोरी ऑफ सिविलाइजेशन. ओके, क्लास 9th and 10th उसको पढ़िए आप, एंड ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दैट यू शुड सी आवर सिलेबस. ऑलराइट, सो दैट्स ऑल द बेस्ट फ्रॉम आवर साइड.